The air in the private boarding lounge hummed with quiet privilege, the rustle of designer coats, the soft clink of Rolexes against champagne flutes, and the practiced laughter of people who had long grown used to traveling above the rest of the world. Outside, the tarmac shimmered beneath the harsh lights, where a gleaming jet waited like a promise of power. Boarding was called, and the select few rose as though summoned to a royal procession. Carla Bennett stood at the aircraft door, her lipstick flawless, her posture sharp as a blade. She lived for moments like these, greeting the elite, standing just close enough to their wealth to feel it brush against her, but never quite close enough to own any of it herself. Tonight, though, she wasn't just greeting passengers. She had her phone angled discreetly against the doorframe, her live stream running, hidden behind the glow of a professional smile. "Another glamorous flight," she whispered to her audience, her voice honey over ice. "Let's see who thinks they belong in first class tonight." The first passengers stepped up, a silver-haired senator and his wife, draped in pearls, their names already known to Carla. She lavished them with the perfect greeting, her words floating like champagne bubbles. Then came a hedge fund manager she recognized from tabloids. He smirked, giving her a wink she pretended to find flattering. The jet was filling with power players, their wealth spilling into the air like invisible perfume. And then he came. Dr. Marcus Ellington stepped forward without ceremony, without an entourage, without the loud declarations of wealth the others wore like armor. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark skin catching the glow of the jet's lights. His suit was tailored but understated, navy wool, not flashy, not loud. His shoes shined, but not in the way of someone who cared about appearances. It was the pièce, bullish of discipline, of habit. In one hand, he carried a simple leather briefcase, worn at the edges like it had traveled with him for years. Carla's smile faltered, just for a breath. Something about him didn't fit. He wasn't nervous, like someone sneaking into a space they didn't belong. He wasn't loud, like the men who tried to prove they belonged. He was simply still, confident in silence. And to Carla, that quiet confidence looked suspicious. "Good evening, sir," she said brightly, but her eyes flicked to his boarding pass like she was about to catch a lie. Her live stream ticked higher with viewers. Her audience loved drama. She tilted her phone slightly, catching his image in the background. "Another mystery man boarding tonight," she whispered quickly into her mic before turning her attention back to him. Marcus offered her the boarding pass without hesitation. His expression was calm, unreadable, but his eyes, steady, dark, and unflinching, met hers in a way that made her throat tighten. She ignored it, focusing instead on the name printed in bold, Dr. Marcus Ellington, Seat 2A, First Class. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't recognize the name, and in Carla's mind, anyone who belonged in this world was a name you recognized. Her thoughts sharpened into suspicion. Maybe he borrowed money. Maybe he was someone's guest. Maybe, just maybe, he was trying to slip into first class where he didn't belong. Behind him, another passenger muttered under his breath, not softly enough. "Strange, huh? Doesn't look like the usual crowd." His wife gave a quiet, conspiratorial nod. Their voices sliced the air, subtle but cruel. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't even turn his head. Instead, he adjusted the cuff of his shirt, a simple gesture that revealed the glint of a platinum watch. Quiet, refined, yet unmistakably expensive to anyone who truly knew. Carla noticed it but brushed it aside. She'd already made her judgment. The cabin felt tighter as he stepped past her into the aisle, the whispers chasing him like shadows. Carla's phone buzzed in her palm, comments scrolling across the screen. "Who's that guy? He doesn't fit. Watch her catch him." Suspense curled through the jet like smoke. Every seat he passed seemed to pause. Every eye seemed to linger. Carla leaned into the doorframe, her polished smile never wavering, but inside her chest, a different thrill was building. She thought she'd spotted tonight's drama, the kind that could make her live stream go viral. And in seat 2A, Marcus Ellington set down his briefcase, opened his phone, and began typing a message. Calm, deliberate, as though he already knew the storm that was about to come. The cabin air was thick with the quiet hum of wealth, perfumed whispers, the muted clink of ice in crystal glasses, the rustle of silk and Italian leather. Every seat in first class seemed to have already found its rhythm, the practiced dance of power players settling into their thrones. But as Marcus Ellington placed his leather briefcase beneath seat 2A and adjusted his cuff, the rhythm fractured. Silence slid across the cabin like a shadow. Carla Bennett had not moved from the doorframe. Her smile, bright enough for her live stream audience, had calcified into something sharper, more brittle. Her phone buzzed with comments, viewers egging her on. Check his pass again. He doesn't look the part. Drama incoming. She thrived on this kind of fuel, the intoxicating mix of attention and control. She stepped down the aisle with deliberate precision, heels clicking against the floor like a metronome of judgment. The businessman in 1C lifted his phone slightly, pretending to read emails, but the red recording light betrayed him. A few rows back, an older woman in pearls leaned close to her husband. Always trying to sneak in, she muttered, just loud enough to spread like smoke. Sir? Carla's voice sliced through the cabin, sweet on the Sioux, her face but laced with condescension. I'll need to see your boarding pass again. Marcus did not look up immediately. He finished typing a message on his phone, placed it face down on the tray table, and only then turned his gaze toward her. His expression was unreadable, calm to the point of unsettling. Without a word, he extended the boarding pass once more, his hand steady, unhurried. Carla snatched it with theatrical suspicion, holding it up to the light like she was uncovering contraband. Seat 2A, she read, voice pitched to carry beyond their row. First class. Her brow furrowed, lips tightening. Are you sure this is yours? A ripple ran through the passengers. Some leaned forward, eager for spectacle. The businessman in 1C smirked and angled his phone for a better shot. Suspense coiled through the air. No one moved. No one blinked. Yes, Marcus said softly, his voice carrying weight despite its quietness. It is mine. Carla scoffed, slapping the ticket against her palm like evidence in a courtroom. First-class seats aren't cheap, you know. People pay good money to sit here. She leaned closer, her smile widening just enough to bare her teeth. You wouldn't want to be embarrassed in front of all these people if you've made a mistake. The words dripped venom disguised as concern. Passengers shifted in their seats, some nodding, others uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The hum of the jet's system seemed louder now, a backdrop of pressure closing in. Marcus adjusted his blazer, the motion smooth, unbothered. There is no mistake, he said, his tone even, almost too controlled. His watch caught the cabin light again, platinum glinting like a quiet rebuttal. Carla's live stream comments were exploding. She's got him. Call security. He looks nervous. But Marcus didn't look nervous. He looked like a man who had seen storms far greater than this, a man who understood patience as a weapon. She leaned back, ticket still in her hand, her voice rising just slightly. Passengers, I'm sorry for the delay, she announced, turning to face the cabin. We seem to have someone sitting where they don't belong. Gasps, whispers. The elderly woman in pearls clicked her tongue in disapproval. The businessman in 1C whispered to his recording, This is what entitlement looks like. For a heartbeat, Marcus said nothing. His silence stretched, filling every corner of the cabin until it felt like gravity itself. Then he reached out calmly, took back his boarding pass, and spoke with a quiet authority that made even the air seem to pause. I suggest, he said, each word deliberate, that you confirm with your system before making accusations in public. It was not loud. It was not angry. But the weight of it pressed against Carla's chest like a hand she couldn't push away. Her audience wanted drama. The passengers wanted blood. Carla wanted control. And Marcus? Marcus wanted something none of them yet understood. The storm had only just begun. The boarding door had closed with a hollow thud, sealing the cabin in an atmosphere thick with tension. First class had become less a sanctuary of comfort and more a stage, an arena where assumptions, whispers, and judgments circled like vultures waiting for their feast. Every passenger in the cabin knew it. Everyone could feel it. The man in 2A was no longer just another traveler. He was now the center of the storm. Carla Bennett, her lipstick perfect and her smile just sharp enough to cut, lingered a step too long in the aisle. Her phone rested in her hand at hip level, camera already rolling. The live stream viewers had doubled since she first hinted that something suspicious was happening on board. The comments scrolled so quickly she barely caught them. "Expose him! We love this tea. Bet he forged that ticket." The validation was intoxicating. This was no longer about routine service. This was her moment. She turned toward her audience for a fleeting second, whispering into her mic with a conspiratorial grin. "Watch closely, y'all. Some people really think they can fake their way into first class." Then she pivoted back, her smile replaced by a mask of official authority. "Sir," she said, her voice pitched louder now so every ear in the cabin could hear, "I'll need you to move. Coach is back there." She gestured with her hand, dismissive, the way one might direct a lost tourist. Marcus Ellington did not move. He didn't even glance at her gesture. He remained seated, legs crossed, phone face down on the tray table, posture immaculate. The quiet dignity in his stillness was unnerving. "I am in the correct seat," he replied, his voice calm, unwavering. 2A, first class. That calmness infuriated her. She wanted him flustered, stumbling, desperate to prove himself. Instead, he sat like a man who had no need to prove anything at all. "Don't play games with me," she snapped, her patience cracking. Her voice carried across the cabin like a whip. "We all know these seats cost more than some people's cars. Unless you can prove you belong here, I suggest you stop wasting our time." A collective inhale swept through the passengers. The businessman in 1C adjusted his camera, whispering to his recording. "This is it, folks. Caught red-handed. He's about to be exposed." His words dripped with smug certainty. The older woman in pearls leaned toward her husband again. "I told you," she said in a hushed but audible voice. "They always try this nonsense. Always." Her husband gave a slow, satisfied nod. Only two people seemed unsettled. A young Latina woman in 3B shifted uncomfortably, her hands tightening around the straps of her purse. The black man in 4C frowned, his jaw clenching as he watched the scene unfold. They recognized the script, the ugly familiarity of it. Carla, fueled by her growing audience and the murmurs of support from the cabin, decided to make her move. She reached down, snatched the boarding pass from Marcus's tray table as if seizing stolen property, and held it aloft. "Ladies and gentlemen," she declared, her voice theatrically sharp, "we appear to have a situation. This passenger is refusing to move from a seat that doesn't belong to him." Gasps. A few passengers shook their heads. The businessman in 1C grinned, narrating into his phone. Unbelievable, trying to scam his way up here. Marcus remained motionless. He didn't grab for the ticket. He didn't raise his voice. He simply folded his hands in his lap and looked up at Carla, his eyes steady, unreadable. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cutting through the whispers like steel beneath silk, "you will return my boarding pass immediately." The way he said it wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the kind of authority that made even the strongest personalities hesitate. For a second, Carla's hand trembled, but the swell of validation from her phone's live feed emboldened her. Instead of handing it back, she slapped the boarding pass hard against his chest, the sound echoing in the tight cabin like a gunshot. Gasps erupted. The impact wasn't violent enough to injure, but it was deliberate, calculated humiliation. "Don't try to scam your way into places you don't belong, honey," she sneaked. Red, her words acidic, her smile cruel. The businessman in 1C chuckled darkly into his recording. "There it is," he said, his voice gleeful. "Caught. Perfect." The pearls and silk woman nodded approvingly. "Good for her," she whispered, self-satisfied. But the silence that followed was louder than any applause. Passengers were frozen, shocked not only by Carla's brazenness but by Marcus's lack of reaction. He didn't lash out. He didn't defend himself. He simply reached down, picked up the boarding pass from where it had fallen, smoothed it carefully between his fingers, and placed it back on the tray. Then he looked up at Carla, his eyes so calm they were terrifying. "You have made a grave mistake," he said softly, so softly that those in the first 3 rows had to strain to hear, but the weight of it pressed into their bones. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was a promise. And for the first time that evening, Carla felt something she hadn't expected. Fear. The hum of the engines waiting on idle should have been a comfort, a sign that the journey was moments from beginning. Instead, it became the backdrop to a drama so sharp it carved the air. The slap of the boarding pass still echoed in every passenger's mind. No one was sipping champagne now. No one was adjusting their blankets. Every eye in first class had sharpened, locked on the man in 2A and the flight attendant who had just declared him an intruder. Carla Bennett held her ground in the aisle, her phone still running at her side. The numbers on her screen climbed steadily, 200 live viewers, then 250. Her pulse raced with the thrill of an audience. This wasn't just her job anymore. This was her stage, and she had an entire crowd watching her take down the man she was convinced didn't belong. "Security to gate 7, she barked into her headset, her voice deliberately loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "We have a passenger refusing to comply." The effect was immediate. Passengers shifted in their seats, murmurs rising like a swarm. The businessman in 1C whispered into his phone, "Here it comes, folks. Wait till they drag him out." His voice dripped with smug anticipation. The older woman in pearls leaned forward, her eyes bright with self-righteous satisfaction. "Finally," she hissed, "someone with authority." But in seat 2A, Marcus Ellington remained composed, the picture of restraint. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't shifted his posture. He sat as though rooted in stone, his hands folded neatly on his lap, his dark eyes fixed on Carla with unnerving calm. That composure, the refusal to break, only unsettled her more. The sound of heavy boots thudding on the jet bridge snapped the tension tighter. 2 uniformed security officers boarded, filling the narrow aisle with their bulk. Officer Martinez, tall and broad with graying temples, took the lead. He scanned the scene with practiced detachment, though his eyes were already guided by Carla's frantic gestures. "This is the passenger," she announced, pointing directly at Marcus. "He's in the wrong seat, and he refuses to move. He's delaying our departure." Marcus did not look at the officers. He didn't even flinch as they loomed over him. Instead, he reached for his phone, tapped the screen with quiet precision, and sent a message. The action was so calm, so deliberate, it almost seemed defiant. "Sir," Martinez began, his tone firm but polite, "I'll need you to gather your belongings and step off the aircraft." A hush fell over the cabin. Everyone leaned forward, breath held, waiting for the confrontation. Marcus finally looked up, his voice even, steady. "No." The single word dropped like a stone, in water, sending ripples through the cabin. Passengers gasped. The businessman in 1C muttered into his recording, "Did you hear that? He said no. This is about to get ugly." Carla seized the moment, her voice dripping with false pity. "See? He's refusing orders. I told you he doesn't belong here." She adjusted her phone subtly, ensuring her viewers caught every angle of the unfolding drama. But Marcus wasn't looking at her. His eyes were on Officer Martinez, steady and unblinking. "Before you remove me," he said calmly, "you will confirm my boarding pass through your official system. You will not rely on assumptions. You will not act on accusations. You will follow protocol." The measured authority in his tone sent a ripple of discomfort through the cabin. Martinez shifted, caught between his duty to enforce compliance and the unusual gravity of Marcus's words. Carla, sensing hesitation, pounced. Officer, please, we don't have time for games. The tower is waiting on us. Just take him off the plane. The businessman in 1C smirked. Drag him out already, he whispered into his phone. The pearl-clad woman nodded vigorously. He's holding everyone up. But in the back row, the young Latina woman in 3B whispered, almost to herself, I saw his pass. It said 2A. The black man in 4C nodded, his voice low but firm. So did I. She's lying. Their words cut through the growing chaos, but Carla drowned them out, her voice louder, sharper. You see what he's doing? Playing victim. This is exactly what I told you. Martinez's radio crackled. Officer, status update, a voice demanded. He hesitated. The entire cabin was watching him, half of them recording, the other half whispering judgments. The weight of decision pressed down like iron. Marcus leaned back in his seat, calm as ever. His platinum watch caught the light, his briefcase sat untouched at his feet. He was not the picture of a man caught in a lie. He was the picture of a man waiting for others to realize the magnitude of their mistake, yet carrying the power of someone who had never been denied before. If you force me, the consequences will be far greater than a delayed departure. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Carla's livestream comments slowed for a moment, viewers sensing a shift. Something in his tone, in the absolute certainty of his words, suggested that this was no ordinary passenger. And for the first time since the drama began, a flicker of doubt crossed Officer Martinez's face. The cabin was no longer a sanctuary of leather seats and whispered privilege. It had become a courtroom. Every row was a gallery, every phone a witness stand, and every heartbeat carried the tension of a trial about to tip into chaos. The hum of the aircraft's systems pressed in like a drumbeat, steady, unrelenting, daring someone to break first. Carla Bennett could feel the sweat building under her crisp uniform, though her face still bore the same perfect smile she'd plastered on for her live-stream audience. The numbers on her screen had surged past 300. Hearts and laughing emojis bubbled up the feed, cheering her on as she stood in the aisle, boarding pass in hand, treating the man in 2A like an interloper who had dared to soil the sanctity of first class. But Marcus Ellington had not moved. He had not raised his voice. He had not faltered. He sat as if carved from stone, dark eyes steady, posture composed. His very stillness was louder than her accusations, and it infuriated her. Sir, Officer Martinez repeated, his voice firmer now. I'm giving you a lawful instruction. Please gather your belongings and step off this aircraft. Marcus's reply was quiet, almost too quiet, but it cut through the air sharper than a shout. No. Gasps rippled across the cabin. The businessman in 1C, phone still angled, leaned closer to his camera. You heard it here, folks. He's refusing. This guy is done. His voice carried the smug satisfaction of someone convinced they were about to witness a public downfall. The woman in pearls clutched her husband's arm. This is ridiculous, she whispered, her tone thick with disdain. People like him always think they can get away with it. Carla seized the momentum, her voice rising, her performance for both the cabin and her hidden audience. You're disrupting this flight, sir. You're making this difficult for everyone here, and we're not going to tolerate it. Marcus finally lifted his gaze to her, his eyes steady, calm, but carrying something deeper, something that made her pulse hitch for just a second. Return my boarding pass, he said evenly. Now. The way he said it was not a plea. It was not even a demand. It was an instruction, absolute and unyielding, delivered with the authority of someone who had lived his entire life expecting to be obeyed. And that was what unhinged her. Her fingers tightened around the flimsy piece of paper, her smile twisted into something cruel. You want this back? She sneered, lifting the pass high for everyone to see. You want me to hand this back like you actually belong here? Gasps again. The tension was coiling tighter, suffocating. Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably, but before he could step in, Carla made her move. With a sharp, deliberate motion, she slapped the boarding pass hard against Marcus's chest, the sound echoing in the enclosed cabin like a crack of thunder. It wasn't just paper against fabric, it was a public declaration, a performance designed to humiliate. The businessman in 1C grinned at his camera. "There it is," he whispered gleefully. "The scam exposed." The pearl-draped woman nodded approvingly, her chin lifted in smug vindication. "Good for her. Someone has to keep order." But the rest of the cabin froze. Time seemed to stop in that moment. Passengers who had been whispering now sat silent, eyes wide, as though they had witnessed a line being crossed. The young Latina in 3B flinched visibly. The black man in 4C shifted forward, his hands gripping the armrests like he might leap to his feet. Marcus did not flinch. Not when the paper struck his chest. Not when the whispers swelled. Not when Carla leaned back with a self-satisfied smirk, her audience still pouring validation into her phone. He reached down slowly, deliberately, and picked up the boarding pass from where it had fallen into his lap. With meticulous care, he smoothed the crease Carla had made, folded it neatly, and placed it back on his tray table. His movements were unhurried, almost ritualistic, as if the act itself carried a significance no one else could understand. Then he looked up. His expression was calm. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet. But there was something in the weight of it that made the air itself seem to hold its breath. "You have made," he said softly, "a grave mistake." The words weren't loud, but they hit harder than any shout. They weren't a threat. They were a prophecy. And everyone in the cabin felt it. Even Carla, for all her bravado, felt the flicker of fear crawl across her skin. Her phone buzzed violently in her palm, comments exploding across the live stream. "Whoa, he's not backing down." That sounded scary. "Who is this guy?" For the first time, the audience she had thought was hers began to question the narrative. And Carla realized too late. This was no ordinary passenger. The slap had not ended the confrontation. It had ignited it. The sound of that paper slap still lingered in the cabin, reverberating in the minds of every passenger, like a drumbeat they couldn't shake. First class was silent now, not the silence of peace, but the silence of a courtroom where everyone waits for the verdict. The air felt thick, charged, almost electric. Carla Bennett stood tall in the aisle, chest rising and falling too quickly beneath her crisp uniform. Her finger clutched her phone, the live stream still rolling, her hidden audience swelling past 400. They were eating it up, flooding her feed with laughing emojis with commands to drag him out and teach him a lesson. Their voices fed her pride, and yet, beneath the adrenaline, something colder was forming. Unease. Because Marcus Ellington hadn't broken. Most passengers, confronted publicly, slapped with humiliation, would have snapped back or shrunk in shame. But not him. He sat in 2A with the same unshakable posture, his eyes steady, unblinking, his breathing measured. He looked less like a man defeated and more like a man waiting for the moment everyone else realized just how badly they had miscalculated. Officer Martinez shifted his weight, glancing between Carla and Marcus, caught between orders and instinct. "Sir, I'll ask you one last time. Please come with us." Marcus finally moved, not quickly, not defensively, but with deliberate grace. He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer. The motion was slow, careful, but it drew every eye in the cabin. The businessman in 1C raised his phone higher, whispering breathlessly, "He's reaching for something." The older woman in pearls clutched her husband's arm, gasping, "Oh my God, what is he doing?" Suspense tightened its grip on the room. Even Officer Martinez tensed, his hand twitching toward the radio clipped to his belt. Marcus withdrew not a weapon, not a document, but a slim black leather holder. Simple, understated, the kind of object most would overlook. He set it gently on his tray table, his fingers resting on it for a moment. Then, with the same calm precision that had defined every move he made, he opened it and slid out a single card. He placed it face down in front of him. The gesture was subtle, almost quiet, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking wood. "Mr. Officer," Marcus said, his voice low but carrying with remarkable clarity. "Before you make a decision you cannot take back, I suggest you allow the captain to review this situation personally." The businessman in 1C leaned forward, his camera zooming in, desperate to capture whatever was on that card. His live stream comments were exploding. "What is it? Show us the card. This is getting wild." Carla laughed sharply, though it rang hollow in the charged air. "Oh, please," she snapped, her words dripping with scorn. "What's that supposed to be? A fake business card you printed at FedEx? What are you going to do? Hand us your CEO of Nowhere card?" She raised her phone slightly, trying to angle it toward the card, her live stream audience urging her to get closer. Marcus didn't react. He didn't need to. His silence, his composure, his quiet certainty, it was louder than any insult. The young Latina woman in 3B craned her neck, her eyes widening as she caught a glimpse of the card. She froze, her mouth falling open slightly. "Oh my God," she whispered, barely audible. The black man in 4C turned his head toward her, frowning. "What is it?" She only shook her head, unable to find words. Carla caught the exchange, her suspicion flaring. "What are you looking at?" she demanded. Her voice cracked with the first faint trace of doubt, and that doubt bled into the cabin. Passengers who had been so quick to condemn now leaned forward with curiosity. Something was shifting. The narrative Carla had spun so confidently for her audience was beginning to unravel. Marcus finally lifted the card, turning it just enough for Officer Martinez to see. Martinez's brows drew together, his eyes flickering over the embossed gold lettering. His posture changed, just a fraction, but enough to be noticed. "What does it say?" someone whispered from the back. Marcus said nothing. He only leaned back, fingers resting lightly on the card, eyes never leaving Carla's face. His calm was no longer just unnerving, it was terrifying. It was the calm of someone who knew, with absolute certainty, that the power in the room belonged to him. Carla tried to recover, her voice rising louder, almost shrill. "Don't fall for this. Anyone can print a business card. He doesn't belong here. He's stalling, that's all. Security, just take him off already." But her words rang thinner than before, hollow against the growing weight of curiosity and unease filling the cabin. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Phones kept recording. Even her live stream comments had begun to turn. Why does he look so confident? The guard looks nervous. Wait, what if he's important? For the first time, the spotlight Carla had claimed for herself slipped away. Every eye, every camera, every whisper now centered on the black card resting in Marcus Ellington's hand. And though no one yet knew what it revealed, they all felt it in their bones. This was no ordinary man. This was the beginning of a reckoning. The silence in the cabin was so tight it felt like the air had been vacuum sealed. No one moved. No one even dared to cough. All eyes were pinned to the black card resting in Marcus Ellington's hand, gleaming faintly under the cabin lights. Carla's smile faltered. She could feel her phone vibrating with the constant flood of comments, but she didn't dare look down at it now. Her audience, the very fuel that had driven her arrogance, was slipping from her grasp. She tried to hold her posture, chin lifted, eyes narrowed, but inside she felt the first tremor of fear. Officer Martinez was the first to break the silence. His voice had lost the clipped authority it carried only minutes before. "Captain should see this." The businessman in 1C whispered to his camera, voice shaky with the thrill of capturing something forbidden. "They're bringing in the captain. Something's going down. This guy, he might not be who we thought." His viewers spammed the feed with, "Don't stop, Streamy. Zoom in. Who is he?" Carla snapped back, desperation lacing her tone. "No, absolutely not. He's stalling. That's all this is. Officer, don't let him waste our time. The flight has a schedule. People have connections. He doesn't belong here." She gestured toward the cockpit, her voice rising with false confidence. The captain has more important things to deal with than some scam artist with a fake card. Marcus's eyes slid toward her then, slow and deliberate, pinning her like a butterfly under glass. He didn't need to raise his voice. The weight of his calm was crushing enough. "You've already wasted more time than you realize," he said. The words sent a shiver down the cabin. Minutes later, the cockpit door opened with a metallic hiss, and Captain Reynolds stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver streaks cutting through his hair, the captain carried the kind of presence that made people straighten instinctively. His expression was firm but cautious, his sharp eyes scanning the tense scene unfolding in his first-class cabin. "What's going on here?" he asked, voice steady but edged with impatience. He glanced at Officer Martinez, then at Carla, who immediately jumped at the chance to reclaim the narrative. "Captain, thank you for coming," Carla said, her tone sugary, practiced, her phone now hidden behind her clipboard. "This passenger," she jabbed a manicured finger toward Marcus, "was caught sneaking into first class with a fake boarding pass. He's refused to comply with security's orders to deplane, and now he's trying to intimidate everyone with some phony business card." The captain turned to Marcus, who had not shifted an inch. His eyes lingered on the black card still resting calmly in Marcus's hand. Without a word, Marcus extended it toward him. The captain hesitated, then took it. His eyes dropped to the gold lettering, and in that moment the transformation in his face was unmistakable. His brows furrowed, then lifted, then drew together again as recognition flooded him. He glanced back at Marcus, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and sudden respect. The murmurs started immediately. "What does it say? Who is this guy? Why does the captain look like that?" Carla's chest tightened. She tried to laugh it off, a brittle sound that cracked in the air. "Captain, please, don't tell me you're taking this seriously. Anyone can order fancy cards online. It doesn't mean anything." But Captain Reynolds didn't laugh. He didn't even acknowledge her. His voice dropped lower, more measured, as he addressed Marcus directly. "Dr. Ellington," he said. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. The room shifted on its axis. The passengers froze. Some gasped. The businessman in 1C nearly dropped his phone. The young woman in 3B clapped a hand over her mouth. Even Officer Martinez stiffened, his face paling as the realization set in. Carla's smile shattered. "Dr. Ellington?" she repeated weakly, as though saying the name might somehow undo the truth of it. Marcus inclined his head slightly, the barest acknowledgement, his composure unbroken. "That is correct." The captain cleared his throat, standing straighter, his tone shifting from authority to respect. "Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Marcus Ellington is not only a passenger on this flight, he is the founder and CEO of Ellington Aerospace, the company that designed and built this very jet." The words detonated like dynamite in the cabin. Gasps turned into stunned silence. The businessman's live stream erupted. "What? He owns the jet? No way this is real." Carla staggered back a step, her face draining of color. That's not possible," she stammered, her confidence unraveling into panic. "He can't be. He doesn't look." But her words died under the weight of reality. Everyone knew it now. The man she had mocked, humiliated, and slapped with his own boarding pass was not a fraud. He was the billionaire whose name carried power across boardrooms, governments, and aviation itself. And worse, he now had every witness and every recording of what had just taken place. Marcus leaned back, folding his hands neatly in his lap, eyes still locked on Carla. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Now," he said softly, "shall we discuss who doesn't belong here?" The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Passengers whispered furiously. Phones streamed faster. Officer Martinez swallowed hard, his authority stripped from him. Carla could only stand there, her phone trembling in her hand as the full weight of her mistake crashed down around her. And the nightmarish truth seeped in. The real performance had just begun. The silence broke like glass. One moment the cabin was frozen in collective shock. The next it buzzed with feverish whispers, gasps, and the faint, almost guilty hum of phones still streaming live. What had begun as Carla's spectacle was unraveling before her very eyes, and the crowd that once applauded her bravado now shifted uncomfortably in their leather seats. Carla felt it first in her gut, a heat rising under her skin, a prickling wave that told her the room no longer belonged to her. She had owned it minutes ago, her smirk, her phone, her voice amplified by hundreds of strangers online who egged her on. But now, she could see the betrayal in their eyes. She could feel it. The businessman in 1C who had laughed along at her jabs no longer met her gaze. The older couple in pearls who had nodded when she accused Marcus of sneaking in now shrank back from her as though distance might absolve them. The young Latina in 3B, who had been silent but tense through it all, suddenly turned her head toward Carla, her voice sharp and clear in the tense cabin. "You slapped him. A man like that. Do you even know what you... Vidone?" The words cut through the air like a blade, heads turned, eyes narrowing toward Carla. Murmurs became voices. She hit him. "Did you see that? She slapped him like he was trash. She thought she was the star. Now she's finished." Carla's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Her phone buzzed relentlessly in her palm, her live stream still going, comments pouring in faster than she could blink. But they weren't cheering her anymore. The same digital mob that had cheered when she mocked Marcus now turned venomous. "You're done." She hit a billionaire. Career suicide. Wait until TMZ gets this. Cancel her. Fire her. Carla's eyes flicked to Marcus, searching for a flicker of humanity, some shred of forgiveness she could beg for, but found none. He wasn't angry, not visibly. He wasn't ranting or shouting, he simply was. A calm, immovable presence, his stillness more damning than any outburst could have been. The captain's expression hardened. He slid Marcus's card into his breast pocket like it was a classified document, then squared his shoulders. "Ms. Bennett," he said quietly, but his voice carried the weight of finality. "I suggest you hand over your phone and step aside." Carla's breath caught. "What? No, Captain, you can't. He's manipulating." But she stopped when she saw the passengers. One by one, heads shook. A middle-aged man in 5D leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. "You tried to humiliate him. You tried to humiliate us by assuming we'd just go along with it. Now look at you." The cabin tilted against her. Every set of eyes bore down. The audience had turned jury. The jury had already reached its verdict. Carla clutched her phone tighter, her last tether to control. Her live stream viewers spiked past 1,000 now, feeding her with adrenaline, whispering escape plans in her ear through scrolling text. "Don't give them your phone. It's your evidence. Make them look bad." But the crowd in front of her wasn't buying it anymore. The businessman in 1C, voice trembling with guilt, finally confessed. "I streamed it too. People saw all of it." He turned his phone screen to her, the red recording light like an executioner's torch. Her mouth went dry. There was no undoing it. Suddenly, someone in the back clapped. Slow, sarcastic, each smack of the palms louder than the last. Heads whipped around to see a young man in street clothes, gold chain glinting against his hoodie. He leaned back casually, clapping with deliberate mockery. "Well done, Carla," he sneered. "You just live-streamed the end of your career. For free." Laughter erupted, not joyous, but sharp, cruel, the kind of laughter that twisted the knife deeper. It spread like wildfire, each chuckle pulling the rug further out from under her. Carla's chest heaved. She looked at Marcus one last time, desperate, her voice cracking. "Say something. Tell them I didn't know who you were. Tell them I was just doing my job." Marcus finally leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost kind, but laced with steel that chilled the room. "You weren't doing your job," he said. "You were performing." The passengers stilled again, letting the words sink in. The truth of it was undeniable. And with those words, the atmosphere shifted permanently. Phones pointed not at Marcus anymore, but at Carla. The mob had chosen its new villain. She had once held the power of spectacle. Now she was the spectacle. Carla's knees wobbled, her phone slipped, ping from her fingers and clattering to the carpet. The live stream continued, the audience watching her downfall in real time as the cabin bore down on her like a tribunal. For the first time since stepping onto the jet, she realized something terrifying. She was utterly, completely alone. The cabin had transformed into a courtroom. Every passenger an unappointed juror, every phone a camera lens recording history in real time. Carla Bennett, once the conductor of her own spectacle, now stood in its center as the accused, trembling and cornered. The energy in the room was electric, thick with suspense, heavy with judgment, and teetering on the edge of eruption. But amid the chaos, Marcus Ellington had not moved. He sat with the same collected grace as when he first boarded, his posture straight, his eyes calm, his presence monumental. The storm spun around him, but he was the eye, silent, steady, terrifying in his composure. The captain, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of so many eyes, finally broke the tension. "Dr. Ellington, what do you want us to do here?" His tone was careful, deferential, but beneath it was unease. He wasn't just asking as a captain trying to protect his passengers. He was asking as a man who understood that the wrong answer could change the future of everyone on that plane. The passengers leaned in, breathless, waiting. Marcus finally rose from his seat. The movement alone was seismic. Every head turned, every phone tilted upward to capture him. His height, his presence, his silence, it all expanded as he straightened to his full stature. He didn't speak right away. He let the weight of the moment press down on Carla, on the officer, on the captain, and even on the passengers who had cheered her on. Carla's knees nearly buckled. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her voice had abandoned her. For the first time in years, the woman who lived to broadcast her every word found herself speechless. Marcus let the silence stretch until it quivered, then he spoke. His voice was low, controlled, each syllable deliberate. "You all saw," he said, sweeping his gaze slowly across the cabin. "You all witnessed what happens when arrogance meets ignorance. Ms. Bennett didn't simply make a mistake. She performed. For an audience. At my expense. At this company's expense. And at the expense of your dignity as passengers." He paused, his eyes locking on the businessman in 1C, then on the older couple in pearls, then finally back to Carla. "She thought humiliation was entertainment, and you encouraged her." The crowd shifted, shame curling through the cabin like smoke. Passengers looked down at their shoes, suddenly guilty for the chuckles, the nods, the complicit silence. Marcus's tone hardened. "But here's the problem. This isn't about me. I don't need her apology. I don't need her excuses. What I need, what we all need, is accountability." Carla's lips parted, a broken whisper slipping out. "Please." Marcus stepped closer, his voice sharpened, every word a blade. "You slapped me, Ms. Bennett, not because you thought I was a threat, but because you thought I was beneath you, because you thought you could play queen for your little stage." The room held its breath. Carla shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "I didn't know. I didn't—" "Exactly." Marcus cut her off, his tone merciless. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to know. You judged, condemned, and executed, all for applause." Then he turned, not to the captain, not to the officer, but to the passengers themselves. "So, I leave the decision in your hands," he said, his voice dropping into a gravity that chilled the air. "You watched it unfold. You saw her actions. You've seen the consequences. Should she be allowed to continue serving on this flight, or should she be removed immediately for the safety and dignity of everyone here?" A stunned hush filled the cabin. The captain blinked, caught off guard. Officer Martinez Schiff, Ted uneasily, unsure of protocol, and the passengers, every one of them, realized that the billionaire had flipped the stage. The audience was no longer watching the show. They were the show. The businessman in 1C, hesitant at first, raised his voice. She should go. A murmur of agreement rippled. The young woman in 3B, her voice strong now, added, She disrespected him. She disrespected all of us. She can't stay. The older woman in pearls nodded firmly, her husband echoing, Out. She doesn't belong here. Voices rose, overlapping, swelling into a tide of judgment. Remove her! She crossed the line. She has no place on this flight. Carla's heart pounded, her breaths short and ragged. She backed up against the galley wall, shaking her head violently. No, you can't do this. You're just passengers. You don't have the right. Captain, tell them. This isn't… But the captain didn't save her. He didn't need to. The decision was already made, not by policy, not by procedure, but by the collective voice of those she once believed were her audience. Marcus watched quietly, his expression unreadable, as the cabin transformed into a chorus of condemnation. Then, with a single nod to Officer Martinez, he sealed Carla's fate. Escort her off my jet. The words were not loud, but they landed like a gavel striking wood. Final. Irrevocable. Carla's scream of protest echoed, but it was drowned by the roar of passengers who had turned completely against her. Her phone, still streaming, captured every second of her collapse, the rise and fall of a woman undone by her own performance. And Marcus, standing tall in the center of it all, knew this was only the beginning. The true consequences had yet to unfold. The jet hadn't even touched the runway before the story left the cabin and exploded into the world. Carla's live stream, which she had once treated like her crown jewel, had become a weapon turned against her. By the time Officer Martinez marched her down the narrow aisle, her wrists trembling under his grip, over 2 million people had already seen the slap. Outside, the tarmac buzzed with the usual quiet choreography of private aviation, fuel trucks humming, ground staff guiding lights, the scent of jet fuel sharp in the cool air. But as the cabin door opened, a rush of chaos spilled in. Phones pinged, news alerts flashed. Whispers grew into gasps as passengers realized what was happening in real time. The world was watching them. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Some passengers leaned back in their leather seats, pale, realizing their faces had been captured, their laughter immortalized on the internet. Others frantically deleted their own videos, terrified of being branded complicit. A young influencer covered her mouth as she saw herself trending on Twitter. Girl in 3A, giggling at slap, canceled next. But Marcus Ellington sat in the center of it all, untouched, his hands folded calmly over his knee. He didn't scroll his phone. He didn't watch the panic unfold. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than the alarms going off in the minds of everyone around him. Carla's protests echoed faintly from the tarmac, her voice muffled but desperate. You can't do this to me. I have rights. This is my life. The officer's low commands drowned her out as she was escorted toward a waiting security vehicle. Inside, the passengers were left in a stunned, uneasy silence. Some dared glance at Marcus, waiting for him to say something, to explain what would happen next. But Marcus remained still, his expression unreadable, like a judge who had already issued his ruling and no longer needed to speak. Finally, the captain cleared his throat. Dr. Ellington, shall we proceed to take off once the situation is resolved? Marcus slowly lifted his gaze, scanning the faces of every passenger. His voice was calm, but carried a weight that pressed against every chest in the cabin. No, this flight doesn't continue. Not like this. A collective shiver ran through the crowd. Marcus stood, his tailored suit catching the faint overhead light. I built this company, he said. Every aircraft, every crew, every passenger who steps aboard. I've worked for decades to ensure you feel safe, respected, and honored. And today, one woman made a mockery of all of it. But she wasn't alone. The words landed like thunder. The passengers exchanged guilty glances. He wasn't just condemning Carla. He was condemning them all. You laughed, Marcus continued, his voice steady, unflinching. You encouraged her. You filmed me like I was an animal in a cage, and not one of you, not one, spoke up until after the slap, until after the damage was done. A woman near the front shifted in her seat, her voice quivering. We were afraid. Marcus's eyes cut to her, sharp as glass. Afraid of what? Afraid of doing the right thing? Silence. Marcus let the question hang, then straightened. So here is what will happen. This flight is over. Every one of you will disembark, and every one of you will face the consequences of your complicity. Gasps rippled. The businessman in 1C spoke up, his voice shaky. You can't punish us all. We didn't slap you, we didn't. Marcus's voice cut through him like steel. You didn't stop it. That's the same as approval. Panic broke out in murmurs, voices rising. But the world's already seen. We'll be ruined! We didn't know who you were. Marcus leaned forward, his voice soft now, but deadly. Exactly. You didn't know, and that's the point. I don't want respect because of my name, or my bank account, or the headlines. I demand respect because every human being deserves it, and you all failed that test. Phones vibrated in trembling hands as headlines lit up. Flight attendant assaults black billionaire on his own jet. Passengers filmed, encouraged incident. Ellington responds. This flight is over, says Marcus Ellington. Demands accountability. The jet sat grounded, not because of weather, not because of mechanical issues, but because one man had decided the moral failure aboard could not take off. Marcus turned to the captain. Clear the manifest, every name, every face. I want them identified. I want statements, and then I want them gone. The captain hesitated. All of them? Even all of them? Marcus's eyes narrowed. The crew, the passengers, everyone who sat and watched. The weight of those words crushed the air from the cabin. Passengers pleaded. Some begged for forgiveness. Some tried to bribe, whispering promises of donations, partnerships, deals. But Marcus wasn't swayed. This isn't about money, he said coldly. It's about principle. One by one, the elite passengers realized what was happening. Marcus Ellington wasn't just firing Carla. He was cleansing the jet. Every complicit hand, every silent witness, they were all about to be erased from his world. As the engines cooled, security vehicles pulled closer. The cabin, once a sanctuary of luxury and status, had become a purgatory, and Marcus, calm and unshaken, stood as both judge and executioner. For Carla, her career had ended with a slap. For the passengers, their downfall began with silence. And for Marcus Ellington, this was only the beginning of a reckoning that would shake more than just a flight. It would ripple through an entire industry. The press conference was unlike anything the nation had seen. Outside the Ellington Aeronautics headquarters in Atlanta, the air was alive with static, the kind of tension that clings to the skin and makes every breath heavy. The plaza swarmed with reporters, their microphones trembling in gloved hands, their cameras locked and ready. Protesters lined the barricades, some holding signs reading "Justice for Marcus," others defiantly holding up "She didn't know." It was no longer just a scandal about a flight. It had become a national conversation about race, wealth, power, and the hidden truths behind privilege. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed under chandelier light as Marcus Ellington walked down the hall toward the podium. His staff trailed behind him like shadows, silent, tense, knowing this moment could fracture the industry or redefine it. Marcus, however, moved with the steady gait of a man unshaken. His expression was carved from granite, but his eyes carried fire, measured, deliberate fire. The flight attendant's slap had become more than an assault. It had become a symbol. Carla Bennett's face was plastered across every tabloid, dissected on every podcast, analyzed on morning news segments. Some painted her as a villain, a manipulator undone by her own arrogance. Others, disturbingly, framed her as the victim of power too vast to challenge. And the passengers? Their names and faces had been leaked. Corporations scrambled to distance themselves. Deals collapsed overnight. One hedge fund CEO resigned. An actress issued a tearful apology, begging America to believe she hadn't laughed as hard as the camera suggested. The whole country waited for Marcus to speak. As he approached the microphone, the room fell silent. No coughs, no whispers, just the heavy anticipation of a nation leaning forward. He stood tall, dressed not in his usual tailored suits, but in a simple black sweater and slacks. It was a deliberate choice. He was not here as the billionaire, not here as the tycoon. He was here as a man. "When I boarded my jet last week," he began, his voice deep, resonant, and calm, "I expected to travel in silence, to work, to reflect. I did not expect to become a spectacle. I did not expect to be humiliated. I did not expect the slap heard around the world." The crowd stirred, flashes popping like lightning. "But the slap," Marcus continued, his voice tightening, "isn't the story. It never was. The story is the silence before it, the smirks, the cameras raised, not to stop it, but to savor it. The story is what happens when entertainment outweighs empathy." Reporters scribbled furiously. Marcus's eyes swept the room. "I don't care that I'm a billionaire. I don't care that I own planes, companies, empires. What I care about is this. If a man like me, with everything in his name, can be reduced in seconds to a punchline, what chance does the man without power have? What chance does the woman working 2 jobs have? What chance does the child with nothing but their dignity have if we all stand by and watch?" The silence was total. Marcus leaned closer to the podium, his voice lower now, filled with weight. "This isn't about me. This is about the culture we've built. A culture where cruelty is entertainment, where humanity is expendable, where silence is complicity. And I will not tolerate it on my planes, not in my company, not in my America." Then came the revelation, the moment no one expected. "Effective immediately," Marcus said, his words deliberate. "Ellington Aeronautics is grounding its luxury charter fleet. Every private jet, every contract, every client. Done." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Investors gasped audibly. Protesters outside screamed, some in fury, some in triumph. Marcus raised his hand, silencing them again. "We will rebuild from the ground up. New crew, new passengers, new code of conduct. You want to fly with me? You will sign it. You will live it. If you cannot treat every soul aboard with dignity, you will not fly. Not on my name, not on my wings." The audacity of it was staggering. Billionaires in Silicon Valley cursed under their breath as they realized their exclusive contracts had just been torn. Politicians whispered frantically, already calculating the blow to their convenience. And in the back of the room, a quiet hum of applause began. Subtle at first, then louder, rolling like a tide until it filled the chamber. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't acknowledge the applause. He simply stepped back from the podium, letting his words linger like smoke in the air. The fallout would be catastrophic. His shareholders would rage. His enemies would circle like vultures. Lawsuits would pile high. But Marcus didn't care. This was bigger than profit, bigger than image. This was about sending a message that would cut through every boardroom, every hangar, every luxury cabin. Respect was no longer optional. And as Marcus walked away from the podium, cameras flashing, reporters screaming, America realized something chilling. This wasn't the climax. This was the warning shot. The backlash came like a storm, sudden, violent, and unrelenting. Within 24 hours of Marcus Ellington's press conference, the world was no longer debating what had happened on that jet. They were debating who Marcus Ellington really was. On cable news, fiery panels split down ideological lines. One network ran the chyron. Billionaire tyrant or truth teller? Another flashed. Did Marcus destroy his own empire out of pride? Commentators leaned forward in their chairs, voices raised, building drama for man. Illions of viewers. Some praised him as a moral revolutionary, a man willing to risk billions for integrity. Others painted him as reckless, arrogant, even dangerous. But the loudest voice of all came from Carla Bennett herself. She had managed to secure a primetime interview, seated across from a sympathetic anchor in a dimly lit studio. Her hair was styled to look softer, almost fragile. Her makeup was subdued. Gone was the brash, sharp-tongued flight attendant. In her place sat a woman trembling, her voice cracking just enough to sound authentic. "I was overwhelmed," Carla said, eyes glistening as the camera zoomed in. "I didn't know who he was. He treated me coldly. He made me feel small. I just snapped. And now, my life is ruined." The anchor leaned in, almost whispering. "Carla, are you saying you were provoked?" Tears rolled down Carla's cheek. "I'm saying I was human, and he's using his power to destroy me. He fired not just me, but everyone. He ended careers, reputations, all because of one mistake, one slap." Clips of the interview spread like wildfire. Hashtags began to trend. Hashtag one slap. Hashtag Carla speaks. Hashtag Ellington exposed. On TikTok, creators reenacted the moment, some mocking Marcus's silence, others condemning Carla's crocodile tears. On Twitter, the battle lines deepened. Was Marcus a hero, or was he a tyrant cloaked in morality? Meanwhile, Marcus's enemies, the ones who had been waiting years for a crack in his armor, sensed blood. Corporate rivals released quiet statements dripping with false sympathy. "While we respect Dr. Ellington, we believe grounding his fleet is irresponsible. Our clients remain our priority." Politicians, once photographed grinning beside him, now distanced themselves. One senator thundered on the Senate floor, "We cannot allow billionaires to dictate moral standards by destroying livelihoods on a whim." And then came the leaks. Anonymous sources, Carla's lawyers claimed, began feeding tabloids fragments of Marcus's past. A messy lawsuit from 2 decades earlier, a rumor of a boardroom shooting match. A photo taken out of context showing Marcus scowling at a charity gala. Each piece was small, insignificant alone, but together they painted a narrative his enemies wanted, that Marcus Ellington was not a principled leader, but a ruthless empire builder hiding behind virtue. Inside Ellington Aeronautics, the pressure was unbearable. His board demanded answers. His shareholders demanded reassurance. The stock plummeted. Reporters camped outside his home. Former employees were dragged onto talk shows to air old grudges. But Marcus? He stayed quiet. To his team, his silence felt reckless. To his rivals, it felt like weakness. To his critics, it felt like guilt. But to Marcus, silence was strategy. He knew the storm had to swell before it broke. He knew that every false friend, every snake in a suit, every sycophant who thought they could ride his downfall would reveal themselves in the frenzy. One evening, as rain lashed against the glass walls of his Atlanta penthouse, Marcus stood alone, looking out over the city lights. The skyline glittered, a reminder of everything he had built. Behind him, his chief of staff, Eleanor Hayes, spoke urgently. "Marcus, they're tearing you apart. The shareholders want you to step down. The board's talking about forcing a vote. And Carla, she's become a martyr to half the country. If you don't respond, this could end everything." Marcus turned slowly, his face calm, his voice steady. "No, this hasn't ended anything. This is exactly where it begins." Eleanor blinked, startled. "Begin? Marcus, you're losing everything." He stepped closer, his gaze sharp, electric. "No, I'm losing everyone who was never with me to begin with. Let them go. Let the weak fall away. What's left will be mine. And when I respond, when I finally speak, it won't just end Carla's story. It will end theirs too." Eleanor's breath caught. "What are you planning?" Marcus turned back to the window, his reflection framed by the storm outside. His voice dropped to a near whisper, but the conviction in it shook her to her core. I'm planning to remind the world why Marcus Ellington was never built to be destroyed. The rain pounded harder, as though the sky itself was bracing for what was coming. Because Marcus wasn't just fighting to clear his name anymore. He was preparing for war. The night of Marcus Ellington's reckoning did not come with thunder, nor with fanfare, but with a silence so heavy it could be felt in the marrow of every person watching. America was holding its breath. The world, even beyond its borders, had tuned in, streaming feeds from living rooms, corner bars, airports, college dorms, and boardrooms. Everyone wanted to know how a billionaire, once untouchable, would claw his way back from the jaws of ruin. It was staged inside a modest hall in downtown Atlanta. No grand ballroom, no glittering chandeliers, just a wooden podium, a black curtain, and rows of chairs filled with reporters, critics, allies, and enemies alike. The choice was deliberate. Marcus had stripped away spectacle. Now it would be truth alone that carried him. Carla Bennett was there too, seated 3 rows back. Cameras darted to her face, searching for the twitch of a smirk, the flicker of fear. She wore a beige blazer, her lawyer on one side, her PR handler on the other. She thought she'd won. She thought Marcus had been reduced to desperation. Then the man himself stepped out. He didn't walk like a man defeated. He walked like a man returning to claim a throne. No applause greeted him, but the silence was louder than any ovation. His presence filled the hall as though he owned not just the room, but the air itself. He placed a single folder on the podium, adjusted the microphone, and locked eyes with the sea of lenses staring back at him. "You've heard her story," he began, his voice resonant, steady. "You've heard their lies. Now you will hear the truth." He opened the folder, and in that moment, the world leaned forward. "These," Marcus said, holding up a series of glossy photographs, "were taken on my jet the night of the incident. They were not leaked. They were not edited. They were documented by my security team, because every Ellington Aeronautics aircraft is equipped with security cameras. Cameras no one, not even the crew, knew were running that night." Gasps rippled through the hall. Carla's eyes widened. Her lawyer stiffened. Marcus placed the photos on the podium, one by one. In one frame, Carla could be seen sneering as she whispered to another attendant. In another, she lifted her phone, angling it toward Marcus with a mocking grin. And then, the damning image. Her hand raised mid-swing, frozen in time, her expression not of fear or provocation, but of delight. The room erupted in shouts. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed wildly. Carla's PR handler buried her face in her hands. But Marcus wasn't finished. He pulled out a small device, a recorder. And then there's the audio. He pressed play, and Carla's voice filled the speakers, sharp and cruel. "Let's see if the billionaire even reacts. This'll go viral. Don't miss it." The recording ended. The silence was suffocating. Carla's career, her narrative, her carefully spun web, shattered in seconds. Marcus let the weight of the evidence settle before he spoke again, his voice lower, heavier. This was never about a slap. This was about a spectacle, about turning dignity into entertainment, about greed for attention, no matter the cost. But I warned you, I warned all of you, that silence is complicity. And every person who laughed, every person who whispered, every person who raised their phone instead of their voice, this is your reckoning too. The hall quaked with energy. Some reporters were stunned into stillness. Others scribbled furiously. Carla sobbed quietly, her head hanging low. Her lawyer whispered frantically, already calculating damage control, but everyone knew it was over. Marcus, however, wasn't done rewriting the ending. He leaned forward, eyes blazing with something larger than vindication. "Tomorrow morning, I will announce the creation of the Ellington Institute for Human Dignity, a $1 billion endowment. Its mission? To protect workers in service industries, to provide legal aid, to ensure no man or woman, black, white, rich, poor, ever has to endure humiliation for a paycheck again. This is not about vengeance. This is about transformation. You thought you could destroy me with a slap. Instead, you woke a movement." The hall exploded. Cheers, shouts, applause, outrage, all colliding into chaos. Marcus closed the folder, stepped away from the podium, and without looking back, walked out of the hall. His stride was not hurried. It was sovereign. Outside, the crowd roared. Supporters lifted signs. Protesters lowered theirs, uncertain now, their fury fractured by truth. The press swarmed, but Marcus did not stop. He climbed into his waiting car, the door shut, and the world behind him burned with questions. Inside, his reflection in the tinted glass stared back at him. For the first time since the slap, his lips curved into the faintest smile. Marcus Ellington had not just survived. He had ascended. And America, for better or worse, would never be the same.